Two engines, that was the promise. Two engines meant twice the safety, twice the reassurance, twice the reason to trust your aircraft over mountains, over water, over weather. The Cessna 310 sold that promise harder than almost any other light twin in American aviation history, and it sold it brilliantly. But the engineers who designed the 310 knew something most buyers preferred not to think about. A second engine does not make a light twin safer by default. In the wrong hands, at the wrong weight, at the wrong speed, it can make an accident far more violent. So why did the Cessna 310 become one of America's most iconic light twins? And why did its promise of twin-engine security depend so completely on pilot discipline, training, and a clear-eyed respect for engine-out performance? When Cessna introduced the 310 in 1954, American general aviation was in the middle of a post-war expansion unlike anything before or since. Returning pilots had currency and appetite. Businesses wanted aircraft that projected capability, not just function, but image. Cessna's answer was a machine that looked fast before it even moved. Low wing, tip tanks, swept tail. The 310 carried the visual language of military hardware into a civilian airframe, and that was entirely deliberate. It was the first new design Cessna certified after the war, and the company understood that in a crowded market, perception was half the product. The Federal Aviation Administration certified the original 310 in January 1954. It was powered by two Continental 0470 engines producing 240 horsepower each, giving a cruise speed of around 195 miles per hour and a range that could stretch beyond 1,000 miles with the tip tanks full. For a business traveler in 1955, those numbers were extraordinary, and the aircraft's appearance, photographed relentlessly in Cessna's marketing, reinforced the sense that this was a serious machine for serious people. When the United States Air Force selected the 310 as its off-the-shelf liaison aircraft, designated the L-27A, the civilian market noticed. That kind of validation is worth more than any advertisement. But the design choices that made the 310 so appealing were also the choices that defined its operational character and its risks. The Cessna 310's engines were mounted close to the fuselage, an arrangement that reduced asymmetric yaw in an engine-out scenario compared to aircraft with engines mounted further outboard. That sounds like a safety advantage, and in some respects it was, but it came with a structural trade-off. The nacelles extended behind the trailing edge of the wing, giving the aircraft its distinctive and polarizing look, while keeping the engines tight to the centerline. What this configuration could not change was the underlying physics of a light twin losing an engine at or below VMCA. VMCA, minimum control airspeed, is the speed below which a pilot cannot maintain directional control, with one engine producing full power and the other producing none. For the Cessna 310 series, VMCA sits around 80 knots depending on variant. VSE, the safe single-engine speed, is slightly higher. The danger zone is narrow but unforgiving. A Cessna 310 that loses an engine at low altitude during climb, at maximum gross weight, and flown by a pilot who instinctively reduces power rather than immediately identifying and feathering the dead engine, can enter an uncontrollable roll within seconds. The second engine, still producing full power, becomes the instrument of the accident. This is not a flaw unique to the Cessna 310. It is the defining paradox of all light piston twins. But the 310's performance, its marketing, and its reputation as a capable, confident machine made it particularly susceptible to a specific kind of pilot overconfidence. Buyers who stepped up from single-engine aircraft were often told, implicitly or explicitly, that two engines meant more margin. What they needed to understand was that two engines meant more procedure, more discipline, and a much smaller tolerance for error at the wrong moment. Cessna developed the 310 across more than 2 decades and roughly 30 variants. The 310B introduced the distinctive frog eye landing lights mounted in the nose. The 310G added a 6th seat. The turbocharged T310 variants pushed the service ceiling above 20,000 feet, bringing the aircraft into airspace and weather that further raised the stakes on engine-out management. By the time the 31NR, the final production model, was certified in 1975, the aircraft had grown to 285 horsepower per side via the Continental YO520M, a cruise speed of 222 knots at altitude, and a maximum gross weight of 5,500 pounds. That weight matters. At 5,500 pounds, a 310R operating at maximum gross on a hot day at a high-elevation airport is already near the edge of single-engine climb performance. The published single-engine rate of climb for the 310R under standard conditions is approximately 370 feet per minute, barely enough to clear terrain, and achievable only if the pilot executes the dead engine drill correctly, immediately, and completely. Drag the dead engine's propeller unfeathered into the airstream, and that 370 feet per minute becomes effectively zero. At low altitude, a zero climb rate is not a recoverable situation. Against the competition, the 310's numbers were consistently strong. The Piper PA-23 Apache, the 310's most direct early rival, cruised at around 150 knots with 150 horsepower per side. The later Piper Aztec closed that gap, but remained heavier and less aerodynamically clean. Beechcraft's Travel Air offered comparable performance, but at higher acquisition cost. The 310 sat in a position that was difficult to argue with. Faster than the Apache, cheaper than the Baron, better looking than nearly everything else in its class. It made sense on paper, it made sense in the hangar, it required serious respect in the air. Cessna sold more than 5,400 Cessna 310s before production ended in 1980. Many are still flying today. That longevity is a testament to the aircraft's fundamental soundness. It is also evidence of the depth of its appeal, an appeal that, for many pilots, was rooted in what two engines symbolized rather than what they operationally demanded. The accident record of the 310 and its variants reflects that gap precisely. NTSB data from the 1970s and the 1980s shows a consistent pattern in 310 accidents. Engine failure during initial climb, followed by loss of control due to incorrect engine-out procedure. Not mechanical failure at cruise altitude, not catastrophic structural events, but the 3 to 5 second window after an engine quit at 400 feet, where the pilot had to execute a drill under pressure without hesitation. The aircraft did not punish mechanical failures as harshly as it punished procedural failures. In 1979, a Cessna 310R departed a California airport on a charter flight with 3 occupants. Shortly after takeoff, the right engine lost power. The aircraft rolled right and struck terrain less than a mile from the runway threshold. Investigation determined that the remaining left engine had been producing full power at impact. The dead engine's propeller had not been feathered. The 310 had not been defective. The margin between controllable and uncontrollable had simply closed faster than the crew responded. That pattern, structurally sound aircraft, competent pilots, catastrophic outcome in a 5-second window, appeared repeatedly across 310 accident reports. The aircraft was not broken. The gap between what the 310 promised and what it required had not been bridged. The Cessna 310's place in American aviation history is legitimate. It genuinely delivered performance, range, and capability that changed what business aviation looked like in the 1950s and 1960s. Its design influence is visible in aircraft that came decades later. Its build quality and honest aerodynamics gave pilots who trained properly a reliable, high-performing machine that rewarded precision. But the answer to why the 310's promise of twin-engine security was conditional is straightforward. A second engine on a light piston twin does not provide redundancy in the same way it does on a transport category aircraft. It provides an option. Whether that option becomes a rescue or a liability is determined entirely by the pilot, by the currency of their engine-out training, by their discipline at the moment of failure, by their understanding that VMCA is not a theoretical number in a flight manual, but a physical threshold the aircraft will cross whether the pilot is ready or not. The 310 demanded that its pilots know the difference between feeling safe and being safe. The ones who understood that distinction flew the 310 well. The ones who did not understand learned the hard way that a second engine in the wrong hands at the wrong speed is not a margin of safety. It is a margin of error. If you want to go deeper on light twin accident patterns, or on the specific differences between the 310 and its Piper and Beechcraft rivals, subscribe. Leave a comment below on which classic general aviation twin you want covered next.